So good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. This webinar is happening as a leading up to the UN Big Data Hackathon. Could you just go to the next slide for me? Yeah, so the UN Big Data Hackathon 2022 is a global data science competition that is happening in parallel with the International Conference on Big Data, which is happening at Indonesia, Yogyakarta. This hackathon is hosted by the UN Statistic Division, BPS Indonesia, and the Major Group for Children and Youth. It is also organized in partnership with the UN Global Platform Regional Hubs in UAE, Brazil, Africa, and China, also with ONS UK, Statistics Canada, ISDB, ADB, the UN Center for Training and Development, and also UN Global Pulse. So this hackathon aims at engaging data scientists, data enthusiasts, whether you be a young student in data or a big data expert, to engage all of these people to use data as a tool to create innovative solutions that can help address the global challenges that is happening in the 21st century and also progress the implementation of the SDGs. It also aims at providing a space for data enthusiast people to develop their data science skills, also giving the participants an opportunity to scale their solutions towards the SDGs and collect a lot of innovative solutions that might help boost the implementation of the 2030 agenda. It also aims at supporting youth engagement with the UN and with all of the partner organizations in evidence-based decision making through the analysis of data. So the UN Big Data Hackathon is divided into two tracks as of now. We have the Big Data Expert track, which is focusing more on data scientists, government officials, professionals, researchers who have a familiarity with big data and use of big data analysis. It will be geared more towards use of AI's data and a few other big data sets. We also have the youth track, which is more of a general track, which is aimed at engaging young data scientists, young professionals, or young students who are 32 years old or younger uh, to use data as a tool and create innovative solutions. All levels of data science, all people with all levels of data science skills are welcome. And whether you be young, we had a participant as young as 9 years old in the last hackathon. And as long as you're under 32 years of old age, you can register for this hackathon, for this track. So I'll just go the timeline very quick. The application for the hackathon started on 15th of August, and we are at the deadline for the application is on September 15th, just a little over a week. So please make sure that if you're interested in participating, you register before the 15th of September. We also will have two other webinars on the 10th of October and 31st of October, which is targeted more to the participants of the hackathon. The kickoff of the hackathon will happen on 8th of November, 2 p.m. Yogyakarta time. Please do check the time zones, your own time regions and time zones. It will happen at 2 p.m. UTC plus 7. And the submission for the proposals should be by 12 p.m. Yogyakarta time, which is 12 p.m. UTC plus 7. All the winning teams will be announced by the 15th of December. And if you want any updates regarding the hackathon, any solutions, you can join the mailing list. Yeah. If you wish to register to the hackathon, we have the link there. It's also available on the website. All information regarding the hackathon will be updated on the website regularly. And any updates, if you wish to receive any updates so that you don't miss out on the loop, you can register for the mailing list and all of the updates will be sent to you as an email. So please make sure if you're interested to register for the hackathon or even take part in it. And please do remember that the registration deadline is on the 15th of September. So we are very excited to have all of you be part of this global event. Thank you, Umeema.
Thank you so much, Abhijit. All right. So we're super excited today to be welcoming a wonderful panel of speakers who will discuss how they've been engaging through technologies, innovation towards solving SDGs. And we hope they will be able to inspire you as much as they inspired us. We'll have with us today Sanjana Paul. She's a co-founder and executive director at Earth Hacks, and she'll be tackling SDG 13 on climate action. She'll then be followed by Aline Alvaro Martinez, who is a focal point in Young Scientists Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction at MGCY, the major group for children and youth. And she'll be discussing in particular SDG 11 on sustainable cities and communities. We'll then move on to Ifa Omahoni, who's an open science focal point at MGCY. She'll be given an example around SDG 3 on health and well-being in particular, but discussing more generally open science. And finally, we'll hear from Fatoumata, who's the co-founder and managing partner at Africa Energy Connect, and she'll be discussing in particular SDG 7 on affordable and clean energy. We are so very excited to get started. So today with us, we have Sanjana Paul. She's the co-founder and executive director of Earth Hacks, which is an environmental hackathon organization, and is also currently a researcher at MIT Sensible City Lab, focusing on sustainability and renewable energy. She holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and physics, and she's based out of Cambridge in the USA. Hello, Sanjana. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'll be sharing your slides next.
Thank you. All right, so I guess I'll go ahead and get started. So thank you so much, Mema, for the wonderful introduction. And hi, everyone. It's really exciting to be here with people from all over the world and talk about hackathons as a form of climate action. So if we could go over to the next slide. So I'm Sanjana, I'm the co-founder and executive director of Earth Hacks, which is an environmental hackathon organization. And I also work outside of Earth Hacks in electrical engineering, so working on renewable energy and air quality. And it's very rare I am not thinking about climate action and climate change. So Earth Hacks works with students and organizations from all over the world to host environmental hackathons, focusing on innovative, equitable, and just projects in response to the climate crisis. So we do both in-person and online hackathons, both to reach a global audience and to still be able to do stuff during the COVID-19 pandemic. If we could go to the next slide. So we've worked with and we've also created a ton of different hackathons. These range from teaming up with traditional computer science oriented hacks on college campuses to working with Indigenous leaders on geospatial storytelling, to creating tools for wildlife conservation, to reimagining the sustainable development goals. So it's a pretty wide spectrum of what falls under the umbrella of the term environmental hackathon. So if we could go to the next slide. So now you know what we do, hackathons, a whole bunch of them, a whole bunch of different kinds. Why do we do it? Probably or mostly because climate change is perhaps the singular most important challenge of our time. And we as a species have to be doing everything we can to address it because there's no way that we can solve any other global challenges that we face if we don't have a livable planet to do this on. So while a single
Sorry, Sanjana, I think you've been muted. Okay.
I was muted, yes. What was the last thing you heard?
Just like tackling global challenges. So I think
Okay,
like just
perfect. So I think I was saying that, climate change, most important challenge of our time. We're not going to be able to solve any other global challenges if we don't have a livable planet to do this on. And, a single hackathon might not completely change the planet, but they can still be very, very powerful tools for climate action. Next slide, please. So they're very interdisciplinary, they're democratic environments with an educational focus. They're a positive space for new ideas. They bring together access to resources for participants and much more. Next slide. But we have to apply hackathons and we have to apply the projects that come out of them very carefully. We have to be really cognizant that there is no silver bullet solution to the climate crisis. A single technology cannot solve the climate crisis. And while technology is certainly a necessary part of the action we need to take, governance, public participation, cultural practices, and more are equally important to focus on and invest time and resources in. We have to take a really thoughtful approach that centers responsible innovation and environmental justice when it comes to climate innovation, so that we don't replicate the same structures and the same issues and the same practices that might have led to climate change in the first place. Next slide. So what do these terms mean that I just threw out, and how can we apply them to technology, to practices that we undertake as tech practitioners, so that we use tech and data responsibly, whether that's at hackathons or whether that's elsewhere? So let's start with responsible innovation, which has many definitions, but one of the most commonly cited is this one by Dr. René von Schomburg from the European Commission. So this is important, so I'll read through the whole thing. Responsible research and innovation is a transparent, interactive process by which societal actors and innovators become mutually responsive to each other with a view to the ethical acceptability, sustainability, and social desirability of the innovation process and its marketable products. If we could go to the next slide. The other really core concept that I'd like to introduce is environmental justice, which again has many, many definitions in different contexts, but one of the most common ones is from Dr. Robert Bullard, who's often called the father of environmental justice. He says that all people are entitled to equal environmental protection, regardless of race, color, or national origin. It's the right to live and work and play in a clean environment. So environmental justice, in effect, embraces the principle that all people and communities have a right to equal protection and equal enforcement of environmental laws and regulations. Next slide, please. So to actually apply these concepts, responsible innovation, environmental justice, thoughtful approaches to technology, as tech practitioners, we have to ask difficult and sometimes uncomfortable questions, like who actually gets to be an innovator in the tech space or otherwise? Who gets to decide what technologies are worth pursuing and when they go too far and do more harm than good? Who bears the cost of innovation? Whose human rights are violated when we pursue the creation of new technologies? And who do these technologies help, but who do they harm? How can tech accidentally or intentionally enable false progress, like greenwashing, the act of pretending to be sustainable but not actually doing so, or the rediscovery of existing work, or enable actually harmful false solutions? Next slide, please. So there really is no single answer to any of these questions. Oh, previous one. No single answer to any of these questions. So it's really up to all of us to build up a set of good examples to look up to. The UN Big Data Hackathon is a great place to do this, but your daily life, your daily practice is even better. We have to apply tech, we have to apply data, we have to apply practices like hackathons to environmental challenges given our current global situation. It's very time sensitive. We need to be doing everything we can. But we have to do so in a way that we do more good than harm. We need to do things like decommission coal plants and develop zero emission ways to keep people's homes and hospitals powered. We need to do that, though, in a way that doesn't cause further environmental destruction through poor mining practices. We need to work together to discover new ways of living, which sometimes might mean a return to old ways of living, like eating locally or seasonally. We need to do a lot, and we need to understand that we have to take these actions collectively. And so I'd like to wrap up with 3 key things for you guys to think about. As you work on tech projects and as you engage with environmental innovation, think about how you can center justice and ethical values, and think about why these elements are not centered by default and how we can change that. Think carefully about why you are using technology and understand sometimes there is such a thing as over-engineering problems. Sometimes the best thing to do is to keep things simple and not introduce tech for the sake of doing so in the name of arbitrary innovation. And lastly, whether or not you work primarily within tech, the only way we are going to move forward on anything, whether it's climate action, any of the other sustainable development goals, is with multidisciplinary approaches. So try to make sure that you expose yourself to new ideas, you speak with different people, you understand different approaches to projects and to problem solving. Next slide, please. So with that, I'd really like to thank you for your time. I hope that this was interesting and helpful and made you think a little bit critically about how we can apply tech carefully towards climate innovation. And I'll turn it back over to our excellent facilitators.
Thank you so much, Sanjana, for the excellent presentation. We hope it was inspiring for everyone, especially for those who definitely work in climate action, but also for everyone, as Sanjana mentioned. So yeah, like hackathons like the ones she organizes, as well as the UN Big Data Hackathon, are perfect opportunities to try it out. All right. So next up, it's Aline Alvera Martinez. Aline holds a bachelor's degree in geophysics and earth sciences from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and she's currently a full-time master's student in territorial planning. She's organized the National Mexican Youth Platform on Resilience and Climate Action, and she's currently a regional coordinator for the Global Youth Platform on Resilience and Climate Action. She's also currently the America's Focal Point in Young Scientists on DRR and the Children and Youth Constituency for Sustainable Communities, both in MGCY and in the DRR as well, CYCSC. She's currently based off Mexico City in Mexico. So Ali, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll give it up to you and share the slides. Sorry, I think there was an issue with the presentation. All right.
Okay, thank you so much for the very, very good introduction, and thank you so much for having me here. I'm very, very excited. Okay, so I will go through a case of study that I actually work on. So we're going to realize what is the importance of science and technology, but a little bit more of a theoretical approach. So we're going to look into game theory applications for risk management in the context of SDG 11 and its compliance. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so before we start, we have to set the rules really, really clear, okay? So let's go through this. We have to think about risk, but systemic risk. You know, as the pandemic hit all the world, we had a single element of a really big chain, and all the elements of that change slowly collapsed. So that's systemic risk. That's the systemic nature of risk. Okay, so the second one, oh, sorry, I got this. Let's hold on for a second. Okay, so I was talking about systemic risk. We need to understand how everything falls down once we got these issues. And then we're going to think about the rules of game theory. So we have a game that is a system, okay? We have players, and this is the actual name. So don't get confused. This is the actual name of the elements of game theory. The players are going to be every single person, institution, country, or whatever element that is going to have strategies. And of course, the strategies. All the actions we are going to take in order to make this game happen successfully or fail terribly. That's upon the strategy. We're also thinking about systemic thinking. I already talked about systemic risk, but we also got unsustainable development on all the areas of study. So if we go to the next slide, please. Okay, systemic thinking. We had the probability of something happening. Imagine a hazard, a natural hazard. That is actually a term that is not really liked within the DRR community, but we have to name the things as they are. So we have a hazard that could be a hurricane, that could be an earthquake, a drought, I don't know, whatever. We have the exposure. How responsible we are for living in the place we currently live in. If we live near the coast, we are going to be responsible for taking care of the exposure we have in terms of a hurricane. How vulnerable are we? If we are going to build, I don't know, in front of a seismic fault, we have to take upon these vulnerabilities because the hazard is going to happen. And all together, all this responsibility, this acknowledgement of the vulnerability and the acknowledgement and awareness of exposure is going to give us resilience or the lack of resilience. So we go ahead with the concept of game theory. Okay, so, oh, okay, this, don't worry about it. The game theory. We're going to look into this for, yes, sorry, my computer went crazy, and decided not to show my slides. Okay, now it's showing again. Sorry for this. Okay, so we're going to think about this as a game. We already discussed that it's a system with players and strategies. But we have to think, are all the systems in the same circumstances? Is every single system working in the very same way? Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is a very simple description of a game. We have the system, a closed system, and we have the elements that are the little squares in there. And we have the strategies. We have the actions. So, for example, in every game, the strategy of player number 1 is going to affect player number 2 and vice versa. For every player I, the strategy of player J will simultaneously affect them. If we go to the next slide, please. So if we go back to the pandemic effect, COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that systems aren't constant nor similar. If we have an element that fails and has a bigger impact within another element, and then those elements are also present in another system, we are going to see that the relationships are going to be vastly different. In this scenario, we can also think that countermeasures should take decision making and risk into consideration, because once we have the hazard and once we are exposed to it, and once our vulnerabilities are incredibly different within systems, we cannot take one-size-fits-all countermeasures. And this can be applied to sustainable cities. If we take one-size-fits-all solutions and take them upon all the systems or all the cities or all the communities, we are going to fail terribly. This is why game theory and science, especially theoretical science, has a lot to offer into this sustainable development compliance. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so just to wrap things up, what we can do about this? Okay, so first of all, let's create young scientist groups. Go science, go youth. Let's address systemic risk, but let's do it adequately. Number 2, apply the Nash equilibrium criteria. Pardon me? The Nash equilibrium criteria is the strategy where everyone wins. So let's try for it. And finally, let's strive for deliverables. Let's take into account the player habits, the customs, and the patterns. Once again, let's take into consideration and be very aware of the vulnerabilities, the conditions, and the context of every system. And with this, I finish my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aline, for giving us a glimpse into how to use game theory into solving and preparing for disasters. That was really insightful. And yeah, looking forward to any question that you might have. Again, like if you have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to ask them in the chat box or the Q&A section, and we'll go into this in a moment. So next up, we have Aoife with us today, Aoife Mahoney. She's an open science focal point within the major group for children and youth, and currently a PhD student at Cardiff University. She's actually completing her PhD in psychology and focuses on Registered Reports, which is an open science initiative in scientific journals that aims to increase the quality and transparency of published research. Prior to that, she has had different experience in healthcare research, and she's based out of Cardiff in the UK. Thank you so much, Aoife, for being with us today. We're very excited. So I'll then next year share your slides. Right.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. As Umaima has said, I'm Aoife, and I work on open science with the Major Group for Children and Youth, and specifically its Science Policy Interface platform. So today I'd like to talk a little bit about the importance of an open science approach to the Sustainable Development Goals, and also what the Major Group for Children and Youth has been doing in relation to this. So firstly, I think it's important to specify what I mean when I say open science, because it's a really complex, multifaceted concept that often means different things to different people. So UNESCO has defined open science as an inclusive construct that combines various movements and practices aiming to make multilingual scientific knowledge openly available, accessible, and reusable for everyone to increase scientific collaborations and sharing of information for the benefit of science and for society. And also to open the processes of scientific knowledge creation, evaluation, and communication beyond the traditional scientific academic community. Open science focuses on the key pillars of open scientific knowledge, open scientific infrastructures, science communication, open engagement of societal actors, and open dialogue with other knowledge systems. Can I get the next slide, please? Brilliant, thank you. So within these broad pillars, there are many, many concepts and approaches involved in open science, and they overlap quite a lot. But if I were to go into all of them, we would be here all day. So I think those that are most relevant to us here today are probably open science, open data, and open source software. So open data availability is really important because it
Sorry, Aoife, you've been muted because there was some background noise.
Thank
you.
What was the last thing you heard me say?
Community, sorry about that. We were discussing the community.
Sorry, I'm not sure what that part was.
Okay, sorry. Can you just like re-explain in the last 30 seconds?
Sure. So yeah, I was saying the aspects that are probably most relevant to us today are open data and open source software. And open data availability is important because it enables transparency. It allows us to check the validity of interpretations that have been drawn from the analysis of that data. It also enables reuse of data and reduces research waste, which is a really important issue to address. And of course, although access to scientific knowledge and to research data should be as open as possible, we do need to balance this with people's right to privacy and confidentiality, as well as any legal processes and intellectual property rights. So we need to aim for data to be as open as possible, but as closed as necessary. Where restrictions to accessing data exist, they should be proportionate and they should be justified. And also data anonymization and systems to mediate access to data are really important so that as much data as possible and as appropriate can be shared. In order to make use of open data, open source software and code can become very important. This is software that is made publicly available under an open license so that others can use, modify, and share that software and its source code. And it's really important because it also enables reuse of data, replication. It just increases the availability of digital resources and promotes a generally open approach. And another point that I think is really important within the broader scope of open science, and that's very relevant here today, is collaboration and team science approaches. This is really important in knowledge production, and this needs to include increasing international collaboration, amplifying non-Western voices, work, and perspectives, as well as more interdisciplinary collaboration. All of this allows for wider, more diverse perspectives, coming at problems from multiple angles, and thereby increasing our chances of solving those problems. I don't think I need to convince anyone who's here today of the importance of using data and team science to understand and work towards addressing the major issues and inequalities that exist in the world. But I hope that you agree that openness through open data, open resources, open collaboration, and a number of other open approaches are really essential. And these are recognized as important accelerators for achieving progress, regardless of which sustainable development goals that you're interested in and working on. My own interests are mostly in relation to health more broadly. So even if we just take a second to consider the importance of open science in the COVID-19 pandemic, we were faced with such a huge and urgent problem. And because of that, so many of the usual barriers and restrictive practices of science were overcome, and open, transparent practices like preprints and international collaboration and so many things and open data just became so much more mainstream. And we really hope that that continues in the longer term. So with all of this in mind, MGCY and specifically our science policy interface platform became interested in open science, how we might be able to advocate for a more open approach. Recent achievements include partnering on a journal special issue, and unfortunately, the deadline for the submissions has ended already, but I just wanted to highlight we partnered with the Journal of Science Policy and Governance to issue a call for papers on the topic of open science as an accelerator for the Sustainable Development Goals. We also partnered with UNESCO on that and got support from Global Young Academy. So the submissions for that are currently being reviewed, and we're really looking forward to seeing the published papers when they come through. If you're not aware of the Journal of Science Policy and Governance, it might be worth looking into because they publish various kinds of policy papers and memos written by students and early career researchers. They're really supportive, and this can be a really good way of getting your work out there if you're interested in policy and specifically kind of science policy areas. And another major achievement for MGCY was our collaboration with UNDESA. Can I go back to the previous slide, please? Yeah, thank you. So you can just see a little snapshot of it there on the left side of the screen. And that was a collaboration with UNDESA and the Youth Coalition on Internet Governance, or YSIG. This was a policy brief about digital public goods. So digital public goods are a type of open source software, model, or standard that are usually freely available and that countries can use to kind of operationalize their digital infrastructure. They're considered really important in addressing the issue of digital inclusion, especially for children in emerging economies. And in the UN Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation, the definition they use of what digital public goods are includes the points that they do no harm and they help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So this policy brief we worked on was published earlier this year on UNDESA's website. And it focused on the importance of digital public goods for addressing inequality and the need for much greater youth engagement in the creation, adoption, and governance of digital public goods. As I mentioned, we collaborated on that with the Youth Coalition on Internet Governance, or YSIG, and I can't emphasize enough what great work they do in relation to internet governance and various topics in relation to that. If you're not aware of their work, I really recommend that you check them out and don't hesitate to get involved in their work. Can I get the next slide, please? Great, thank you. So last November, UNESCO launched their recommendation on open science, which I've quoted from extensively at the start of this talk. This is an international framework for open science policy and practice, and they've now turned their attention to the implementation phase. They have a number of different working groups, all focusing on different areas of this, and a few months ago, our open science team provided some inputs on various topics for that. Their work has been underway for a while, but their meetings are open to everyone. And you can find the dates on their website at the link that I've put on the slide. And you're absolutely welcome to attend those. They do have some input from students and early career researchers, but not that much. So I really think there could be a lot more involvement of young people in their work. So it's worth attending those meetings and seeing how you might be able to get involved or provide feedback on what they've done so far. And then very quickly, if that all sounds a bit too much, if you'd like some really quick and easy tasks to kind of help or kind of support the general cause, but don't want to get too involved, just want to highlight a couple of things. So World's Evidence-Based Healthcare Day is coming up on the 20th of October. this brings together all kinds of stakeholders, including researchers, policymakers, various different stakeholders. And they don't specifically emphasize open science in those terms, but it's very much underpinning their ideals, their approach. And they're really committed to ensuring that health evidence is high quality, transparent, and trustworthy. So the values of openness are very much involved in that. They're currently calling for individuals and organizations to join as evidence ambassadors. This just involves creating a vlog post on their specified topic of partnerships for purpose, and also some sharing of content on social media. So very low commitment way to get involved. You can also, if you'd like, organize events around this as well, and they can guide you in doing that, but that's not a mandatory part of becoming an ambassador for them. So if you're interested in healthcare evidence, please do take a look at that. And next slide, please. And finally, I just want to highlight the OSDG, which is an open source initiative that classifies existing research according to the Sustainable Development Goals. It's a fantastic open source initiative, and I've only volunteered with this a tiny bit, not nearly as much as I'd like to, but what I have done was so interesting. It's a really nice, easy, low commitment way to support the cause, and I really recommend checking them out. So that's all from me. I hope this has been of interest, has been helpful, maybe shown some opportunities to get involved. As a final word, if you're ever working on something and you think our open science team could help, please don't hesitate to contact us. My contact details are all on the front page of this set of slides. So thank you so much for your attention. Oh, Umama, you're muted.
Thank you so much, Shifa, for the excellent talk on open science. We do definitely encourage everyone to take a look, especially because as part of the UN Big Data Hackathon, all the data sources that will be available will be open data sources. So it's interesting to see how a lot of people are contributing towards making these available and making sure you use them to make sensible decisions towards SDG challenges. So thank you so much, Aoife, for your presentation.
Thank you.
So yeah, up next is our final speaker. We have with us today Fatoumata Diarra. Thank you so much for joining us today. Fatou is a young entrepreneur in renewable energy from Côte d'Ivoire. She's co-founder and managing partner at African Energy Connect, and a Pan-African startup specialized in rural electrification, solar home systems, mini microgrids, and productive uses of renewable energy. African Energy Connect aims to increase energy access in rural and peri-urban areas of West Africa by providing affordable climate-smart technologies to households and communities not connected to the grid. Fatou is also a fervent advocate for the SDG 7, which calls for affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy by 2030. And she's a particular member of the SDG 7 Youth Constituency, which is a platform for youth that are very interested in bringing access to affordable energy. So thank you so much, Fatou, for being with us today. You're currently based off Indiana in the USA, and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and it was great to hear interesting insights from the previous panelists. My presentation will focus on how youth entrepreneurship can help achieve SDG 7 by sharing my personal experience as a young entrepreneur. We can move to the slide, please. Okay,
can we?
Yeah, can we move to the next slide? Okay. So African Energy Connect has been operating for 2 years now. It's headquartered in Liberia, and we mainly focus on off-grid, rural, and peri-urban households and communities. We conduct energy needs assessment for households and businesses to identify efficient ways for them to save energy. Can we go to the slide before this one, please? So we do awareness campaign to educate rural communities on the benefits of using productive uses of renewable energy equipment. Aside from that, we also work on developing efficient tools to help mini-grid developers and operators better manage their equipment. Our main goal is to help resolve energy deficit for off-grid, rural, and peri-urban communities in Africa. And so our work contributes to effort aimed at achieving SDG 7. Next slide, please. So we currently sell standalone solar home systems, and we do solar installations for homes and institutions. Solar home systems include energy stations. Those are high quality, durable solutions for lighting and charging in all places that have no access to electricity grid. So the solar home system help address the issue of very low grid electrification that is observed in our target market. And most of our customers are challenged with little to no access to reliable and affordable basic lighting systems for their families. Sometimes they don't have access to any form of clean, reliable, and affordable energy source. So, and they are very low income most often. So to allow them to afford our equipment, we integrated a pay-go technology platform. So this platform allows us to sell any powered device to our customers and give them the flexibility to own and pay it through installment plans. Since we have multiple payment gateways integrated into the platform, our customers can choose the most suitable option as per their convenience and income pattern. In addition, we provide solar water pumps for irrigation, drinking water, livestock watering. We also work on providing a smart microgrid controller in the region. And this is where the rest of my presentation will focus, as it fits well with the topic of this webinar. We can move to the next slide, please. So we have a partnership with Smarter Microgrid Limited. It's a company based in the UK, which is highly experienced in smart grid management, energy generation and distribution, and IoT systems. So in collaboration with them, we are working on deploying a smart microgrid controller solution in Liberia. And this solution mainly addresses the challenge of unreliable power. So it's a fact that governments and the private and public electricity utilities often have the challenges of supplying reliable and reasonably priced electricity in the face of serious constraints. And these constraints are often complex and unpredictable. They include the lack of reliable national grid to rural, peri-urban and urban locations alike. For example, due to damage to the infrastructure generation, transmission and distribution caused by typhoons, earthquakes and floods and other natural catastrophes. So the smart microgrid controller can help to minimize the capital and operating cost of a microgrid, often calculated as a levelized cost of electricity, LCOE. So it can monitor all the relevant subsystems of the microgrid and so help the operator to manage the key performance indicators for generation, storage, and consumption efficiently and effectively. And the solution is deployed using a software as a device. So it's available anywhere in the world. It can be easily deployed with the appropriate computing and data communications expertise to install the requisite sensors on the microgrid's equipment. Once the sensors are installed locally, the capabilities of the software as a service will bring the smart microgrid to life and immediately present back to the local provider the dashboard of information from the sensors to manage KPIs and levelize cost of electricity. With this solution, we want to ensure that local mini-grid developers and operators are afforded the relevant tools and equipment to efficiently manage their systems. And this also contributes to create more opportunities for productive uses, especially in off-grid, rural, and special economic zones. Next slide, please. Here is an overview of what data can be generated from the energy system ESCADA software. It applies the latest IT industry leading digital systems technology to provide a superior but affordable solution to the many challenges of managing the generation of electricity from the wind. From the software, it can easily we can easily monitor and manage generating assets remotely. This approach is innovative because it enhances the customer's capacities with information availability and communication systems, infrastructure inspection via drones and other new technologies, active monitorings of the device condition via smart sensors, data analytics to improve periodic and predictive maintenance. So it's very helpful. Next slide, please. And the solution provides a dashboard to track the key performance indicators, and therefore it will optimize the performance of the asset. So it's generate report on generator performance, asset productivity, and also alert in case of error of events, so that you can resolve them on time and avoid expensive generator outages. Next slide, please. So as I previously mentioned, this is a work in progress. Currently, we are engaging with local stakeholders in Liberia, such as the National Utility Company, and also we have several meetings with local mini and microgrid developers to explain them the concept, and together we are trying to explore how we can implement a pilot testing of this technology. Next slide. So one interesting thing about this system is that it specializes in projects that are in the most remote and rural destinations, because this is mainly our area of works. So it provides reliable connectivity, data monitoring, and microgrid solutions to communities that have no very poor grid connectivities. I'm going to end the presentation here. I hope it was very helpful, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Fatou, for the excellent presentation. That was definitely a great example of types of softwares that could be developed through the UN Big Data Hackathon. These are the types of solutions we're looking for. They're definitely helping to bring energy to the most remote areas and being able to monitor them. So thank you so much for introducing this to us, Fatou. Really appreciative. So with that, we are done with our panel of speakers. We're opening it up for questions. Please remember that you can reach out to us additionally if you have any other questions with regards to the webinars. But before that, we have a couple of questions we received in writing. But if you have specific questions to some of the speakers, I'll unmute you and you can ask them directly. I'll just flash them right now so you can remember how they're called. And I see a hand raised from Marisa. So Marisa, you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, thank you very much, Ms. Umaima. And I would like to thank you for all the speakers, because all of you are very inspirational. And then it gives us a lot of insights about what we can do in the hackathon and then the real life solving problems. And there is something that is really interesting for me is from Aline, which is very fascinating to I see the application of the game theory in the solving problems. And I would like to ask Aline more about what is the most interesting case study that you have encountered or used about the implementation of the game theory on data-driven policymaking. Probably in your case, it's more about the disaster risk reduction. And it was really interesting because we are in amongst the pandemic, and I wanted to know more about the implementations of the game theory. Thank you.
Okay, the most interesting. Well, I will say the most challenging one. During the pandemic, we had an earthquake in Mexico City. And of course, this led to people trying to have these shelters and these aid. But the problem was that we couldn't really have shelters within the pandemic. So what had to be done was actually transferring people into other people's houses once they had their COVID-19 test. The way we worked with data and game theory was actually developing this strategy, because once we showed that going one-on-one with affected people and the humanitarian aid in terms of sheltering and housing, we discovered that this particular strategy was the one to follow in order not to make people sick, but also helping them. So once we had data of all the people affected and the zones they were in, we could transfer them to other houses and other shelters and give them the aid they particularly needed. And that's how we use game theory alongside data to address this very, very particular and very, very urgent issue and challenge that happened in 2020. So that's my answer, and thank you so much for the question.
Thank you for the answer.
Thank you to you both. Are there any other questions? You can raise your hands and mute yourself and ask them. Sure, I see another hand raised, I think, or I think it's still Marissa. Okay. All right. So we received a question in writing to Sanjana. So the question was, Sanjana, like, can you please give us some recommendations if you've had experience of having that through the hackathons on how to get financing for the projects, and if previous winners of hackathons have been able to implement the project in real life?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. So I think it's a multifaceted question with a multifaceted answer. I often joke that my most consistent answer to EarthHack's questions is, oh, well, it depends. So I think that there's definitely been some cases of exactly that, the way you laid it out. There's been some cases where, projects from the hackathon have kind of been continued on to turn into something new. So one example is a hackathon that we did called Envision 2050, Designing Sustainable Futures, which was actually focused on the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the winners started a company with their project, which is really cool to see. And so it was 2 graduate students in civil engineering. And so their company is called Planet Green Leaves, and they focus on kind of retrofitting buildings for more efficient energy usage. So that's a fantastic case, and they're extremely talented. But we very much encourage that, and we very much hope and kind of point to opportunities for all of our participants. But we also recognize that oftentimes when people come to a hackathon, they're just committing to the hackathon. They're not committing to 6 months of work afterwards. So at EarthHacks, one of the models that we've developed is to kind of address this, to have projects actually be implemented in the real world without that surprise expectation of completely transforming your life after the hackathon to see if something can come out of it, which again is phenomenal, and we always want to support that. But we work on these, we call them organizational hackathons. So we focus on partnering with organizations that have small specific problems. For example, we worked with a wildlife conservation org called Earth League International, and we asked them to define very small specific challenges that we know we can actually develop something for over the course of the hackathon, and they can actually take and use. So with our hackathon with Earth League International, we developed geospatial tools and a legal framework that the organization is now actually using. So we always encourage our students that, if you see a gap, and if you know that you have the time and capacity to kind of fill it afterwards, go for it. Reach out to us, ask us about how we can use the EarthHacks community, the environmental innovation community, to connect you to opportunities. But also, again, going back to that, don't unnecessarily over-engineer the problem. Think about if there's existing organizations that you can jump in on, so that you can actually skip the, I have to build my organization, I have to find financing for it, I have to assemble a team, and you can just kind of focus on project implementation. So I hope that answered your question, but please feel free to reach out if you'd like to talk more. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjana, for the very thorough response to the question. That was great. And I think, this can inspire also some of the people that already registered to the hackathon to know kind of the outputs of their work. And speaking of creating your own, started focusing on SDG, we had a question for for Fatima on what are some of the main challenges you faced when you started your energy startup?
Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, when it comes to challenging, because this sector is a sector that requires very initial cost in terms of customer acquisition, because like I say, most of our clients have very low income and we provide them with payment plans, installment, meaning we have to acquire the equipment on our own cost. It's very challenging to acquire like commercial financing, whether it's locally and internationally, because as a young startup, we're competing with already established companies. So we're facing that competitive environment, and also locally competing with those established companies to even bid for local contracts can be very challenging as well. So like we are continuously applying for grants, investment opportunity. We were able to win like a small grant last year, which helped us acquire some equipment. But so there's also the challenge of first bringing awareness in those local communities, because not those communities know much about productive use, leveraging solar energy equipment. So we first have to make like campaigns using in local languages, using radio, organizing workshop sessions where we'll be taking time to explaining people first the benefit, the socioeconomic benefit of using those equipment before even having to sell them the equipment. So I would say the two main challenges include acquiring finance and also bringing awareness to last mile users. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatou. So I see hand raised. Sorry, I might not pronounce your name correctly. I think it's Efigene. So do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Okay, thank you very much for that. And my question is creating a better, cleaner energy. And we know that this energy system, they require heavy infrastructure in place. So therefore, they require time to gradually evolve. So what are the technologies that are likely to put in place to create a balance between this reliability, affordability, and sustainability, together with these innovative ideas to see that these are it can pull this, it can be scaled up to a different part of the energy sector. Thank you.
Fatou, were you able to hear? Since
Thank you very much. I couldn't hear quietly, but I will try to answer from what I heard. So what we do, as we say, in case of this project, it's because it's very, like you say, it's very innovative. It's like something new for the region. This is why our current steps is first to discuss with the national utilities companies to see how it is feasible. So if we can, because the technology has been deployed in other countries, but not in that region yet. So we are still, trying to figure out ways to make it possible, like by organizing a pilot testing. And from the testing, we'll be able to see how we can maybe adapt the technologies to the local settings, or what things can be done to be improving it moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take two more questions. So we have one for Aoife that was written, but there's also, I think, a hand raised from Peter. Peter, if you want to ask your question, we're already over time. So let's just go through your question real quick. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, the moderator. Let me first of all commend all the speakers, the presenters. They did a very good job. But I want to direct my question to Fatoumata, who spoke about the affordable and clean energy, and some of the products they've been producing for African uses. I want to ask, can we use some of these products to generate raw data? Knowing fully well that 12 out of 17 SDG are data driven. Can we get a data that statistician can use in possibly unravel some of the problem of the SDG 7? That's my question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, obviously we are able to, because like I say, since the equipment, for when selling the equipment, we're using PayGo software, we are able to integrate indicators such as the tons of CO2 that is being saved, or like how like the clients are able to like use efficiently the energy, how they are able to consume less energy based on their current needs. So there's definitely ways to quantify how much less emissions are done using such equipment.
Thank you so much, Peter and
Okay,
Fatu,
thank you.
for this question. Sorry. All right, so the last question we received for IFA, so the question was how you discussed the work that MGCY has conducted with UNESCO, and if you could give some insights into the recommendations that MGCY made to UNESCO.
Yeah, so we worked on two sets of inputs for them. One was about the elements of successful open science policies, and specifically what makes it successful in how it's implemented. And part of our recommendation for that was around the need for youth collaboration, true co-production, and engagement. And then our other input was focused around the need for reform on funding structures and incentives. A lot of that was focused on within academia and kind of the role of early career researchers, but also more broadly as well. And yeah, that included a lot of focus around empowering early career researchers, the need for capacity building in aspects like science communication, open science skills, like actually making data, according to the FAIR principles, like findable, etc. And yeah, just really not requiring, well, the need to positively kind of assess open science engagement, but that it can't be made a kind of assessment criteria or a mandatory practice without also providing that support and training and capacity building and kind of access to funding to do all of that, because I mean that just kind of further promotes inequality.
Thank you so much, Ifa, for the response. All right, so we're 3 minutes over time. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. As we mentioned, the comments will be sharing the slides and the recording, so make sure you're registered to the mailing list. And yeah, thank you so much for Sanjana, for Ifa, for Aline and Fatu for having come, representing youth and showing ways in which youth can engage towards solving SDGs. We hope it was very informative and inspiring. It's possible. It's true that we're definitely having challenges with regards to making sure we solve SDGs by 2030, but there's youth involved, there's youth doing their best to make that possible. And thank you so much for coming here and letting us know that there's a path forward and that we should be more inspired and more hopeful for the future. Right, so with that being said, we'll be ending the webinar now. Yeah, and we'll keep you in the loop for the next steps for the hackathon. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day or your evening. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sumaima.
Have a good day.